infectious diseases expert, Professor Debbie Bogart from the University of Edinburgh. Good morning, Professor Bogart.
Good morning there.
Nicola Sturgeon's issued this warning. Can you quantify that? How bad could it be?
Well, I think the data that we have so far show this clear, what we've called already for 20 months or so, exponential growth of this new strain. So we have this strain only for less than 2 weeks. And if you see that this strain goes from 1% to 2% to 4% to 8% to 16%, that clearly shows an exponential growth. And the interesting thing here is that it takes all these little steps every 2 to 3 days. So if from today, this was Friday, so let's say today, the amount of cases that is explained by Omicron is about 30%. We can be as high as 100% of all cases being explained by Omicron halfway this week. So it clearly shows that we can potentially face a tsunami of cases. So I fully agree with that.
What is your view about this discussion we've been having pretty much all morning about whether the symptoms are going to be milder out of this variant or not? Is what you're seeing telling you anything on that topic?
Well, I think everybody is saying we should be cautious, and I agree fully with that. We have a new variant that we know can infect people with pre-existing immunity through a recent infection by Delta, and also infect people that have been even double immunized. So, but we assume that that immunity that they have will protect them in part against severe disease. But also with Delta, we've seen we still have quite a significant amount of people in hospital. I think we're about 6,000 cases at the moment, isn't it, in hospital in the entire UK. So even if Omicron would be slightly milder, if this exponential growth keeps on continuing because a much larger proportion of the population is susceptible, we can ultimately face quite an overwhelming number of cases anyway in the hospital. So yeah, the good news is we might be either because the strain is perhaps causing milder illness or less severe cases, and we might be partially protected by our pre-existing immunity. If the doubling time and the number of cases keep on continuing like they're doing now, we might still reach very large numbers. And even if a small proportion of those require hospitalizations, we might get quickly overwhelmed. And I agree that we need to see how this all pans out in the coming weeks. But I don't think that if we really want to be ahead of the game, we have weeks to sit down and wait to see what's happening. So we probably need to act pretty fast to be ahead of the game.
So is it your view that what we need to do is to behave as though the NHS is likely to be overwhelmed by the combination of existing Delta cases plus what might happen out of Omicron? And if we're lucky, we won't have that, but that we have to now behave as though that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody heard the number of 1 million cases that could potentially or theory be reached by Christmas. And I think we all can feel that that's way too much and would way overwhelm the system, let alone have a lot of people being put into isolation, not being able to celebrate Christmas. We have already measures in place. We have already immunity in place. So we need to up our game, I think. So I think the first thing we have that we didn't have a year ago are the vaccines. So I would ask everyone, either if you had 0, 1, or 2 vaccines, to try to quickly get the next vaccine, because if as a community we can up our community immunity, we hopefully can push that virus a bit down and slow it down out of that rapid exponential growth. And the other thing is, the measures in Scotland is now that if you have a case in the household, that you need to self-isolate as a household. And although I agree, people might not like that, it's the best thing to do. Over the last days, data came from England showing that household transmission of this strain is 3 times as high as from Delta. So that means you can't let this go or take that chances. So it's definitely a measure that hopefully helps to reduce the spread.
So you would argue for slightly tougher measures. Would you also support the vaccination of primary school children now?
Yeah, and there are several countries already that do immunize primary school children, and it's definitely a discussion that we hear too little. It's the chain is as weak as the weakest link, I would say, from an immunity perspective. And we still have many children that have no protection by vaccination. So we have a safe vaccine. And I think it would be wise to really quickly consider whether parents have the choice to get their children from the age of 5 up immunized. But also the children 12 up that had only one vaccine or none at all yet, I would actually advise to go and get that shot, their first or their second, and everybody who already got 1 or 2 shots to get their second or their third. And otherwise, I think we really need to up our game with the measures we already have. Think about masking. I really think everybody should really follow that advice. And in crowded places where you can't keep distance, mask up, not only over the mouth, but also over the nose, and preferably very well-fitting mask. And if it's crowded, you can't keep your distance, you could even consider a higher rate mask in FFP2, as they call it, or even double mask, because we really anticipate this will help limit the spread.
Just very briefly, Professor Bogart, if I may just ask you very briefly, you may have heard our interview with Steve Baker MP earlier on, and he essentially said that we have to trust people, we have to give people freedom, that the question of restrictions is really a moral one. How does a scientist respond to that?
Yeah, as a scientist and a doctor, I know that people like to have a choice, but they also want to be well informed and want to be able to weigh their decisions based on the facts. And I think what we can do is show the facts, show how significant this is, how quickly this can get out of hand, and ask them to really work with us to try to limit the spread. It's not only in the general benefit, but also in people's individual benefit, because we want to celebrate Christmas after all, isn't it?
OK, Professor Bogart, I'm sorry to stop you, but we have to move on. But thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're welcome. Have a good day.